Hi everyone, Wolvis here. This is a video in which I'm going to explain a couple of basics of submarine building in Simpleplanes, because when I was building my own submarine, I found it really difficult to actually find any information on how to make your submarine dive, and I also found some other things that might be useful for other people when they're building their own submarine. This is my second attempt right here at building a submarine, and I made it so that it can actually dive and maneuver as well. So if I activate action group 1, which allows me to move the submarine, I can throttle up and it will start increasing. Now in order to make the submarine dive, I'm going to push up VTOL up and I can control how far I will let it dive. It will go about 15 meters down. I'm not going to do that all the way now because it takes about a minute, a bit less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds. Now, before I show you how to actually make this submerged system, I am going to quickly tell you a couple of tips that you should know before you start building your submarine, or that might be useful while you're building your submarine. A couple of things that you definitely need to know is the fact that some parts in Simpleplanes that work above water don't work below water. Think about engines, for example. This engine right now will work, but once it gets below the surface of the water, because it's in contact with water, it will no longer get air, and therefore it will no longer function. The same goes for jet engines. Even when you put air intakes above water, the engines themselves still don't work because they're below the surface. Things that also don't work once they have been underwater are, for example, missiles. So if you're trying to build like a custom intercontinental ballistic missile system, or just normal standard Guardian missiles or Inferno missiles to take out ground targets and aircraft with your submarine, you can, but then your submarine can no longer submerge, because once the missiles have been in contact with the water once, they will no longer be able to launch. For some reason, I've been trying to find a way around this, but so far I've not been able to find a way to mod this out of the parts properties. Yeah, that's about it. Like I said, this is my submarine. It can do a couple of quick and easy stuff, like I can show you how it turns. And it can dive, obviously. It also has torpedoes, which are the most reliable weapon system that actually works, I found. Guns are kind of weird, I found. They don't fully seem to, they do function, it's just kind of weird how the way they work. And rockets will stand out like rocket pods. You can fire them underwater, or at least that's what I've seen so far from other people's builds. But they basically just still look like rockets, except they're underwater. So it's kind of a bugged way of looking at it. The advantage of having just normal torpedoes is that once you go under the surface and you fire a torpedo, it actually resurfaces and then follows on the surface, so you can actually hit targets like the boats and ships over there while you're fully submerged. Yeah, so let's get to it. Let's show you how to make a simple submarine, or at least the basics of it, so you can probably build on it further and build your own submarine. So a while back I created my first attempt, which I've never finished, and that's this basically. It cannot float, it doesn't have a properly working engine, it doesn't sink, it doesn't have any of the basics basically, it's just a frame and a body. No functioning stuff on it. The engine, there's an engine on here, but I've turned that off. And what I've done with the engine is this is not going to be our forms of driving, as you might have been, or more main form of propulsion. As you may have been able to see on the previous submarine, this engine wasn't on. I do that just because it looks better, in my opinion, to just have to have two different engines working, and then have this just move because of the speed. Because when you look at normal real-life submarines, you can notice that their propeller blades, or I think you call them, I don't think you call them propellers, but rotors. Once they're rotating, they don't rotate very fast, just to minimize noise levels because of the air that compresses on the fins of the rotor. And that's why I like to turn it off. I do, however, always customize my pitch level. Instead of hitting auto, I do it on fixed, and then I change it to about 50 so it looks angled. How I basically put it on action group 7 and on pitch because I pretty much never use those combinations on a submarine. So basically this engine is never on. Alright, so now let's get to how to make it float and how to make it submerge first, which is probably the thing most people want to learn anyway, or what they're here for anyway. Now, how I made it work on the other submarine is actually, it's easy, but it's also kind of complicated. So what you need to do first is get yourself a fuselage block and reshape it to 0.25 all the way around. I recommend putting it on circular, just so you can see which parts are the top and bottom. So basically which side is the length part. Now you can basically see that this is the side, basically, which you can change the width and the height, and this is the length. Now I like to make mine a very obvious color, which the flotation devices and the pistons, because they're going to be invisible anyway. And this way I can more easily make out which parts I need to make disappear, basically. So, let's see, we need a piston now. There you go. Our piston is going to be our main... piston is the way we're going to make our submarine submerge, basically. By increasing the VTOL on the left, you can extend the piston, and the flotation part is going to be on top of the piston. And I'm going to paint that a different bright color than the lower part, just so I can see which part belongs in the bottom. So this is going to be, so basically explain how this works real quick. This is going to be attached to the submarine. This is going to be extended to push this part out, which will make our submarine float. So in order to make it float, we'll first have to make this part actually float. I'm going to increase the dead weight and then increase it to be about 30 to 40% buoyant. I think that's about the best value you can get. Then I'm going to go to part, and here you can see the mass scale button. I like to increase this for testing just to about 2. So now this will function as if it's 2 of these parts. Now, what is important is that you don't build off to the sides of these long pylons. Oh, I just accidentally built on top of it. That you don't put a part on the side of it, because those parts are going to break basically and fall off once you rescale it. I don't know why it does this, but that's the way it works for some reason. It's really annoying, but I haven't found a way around it. So you now have your floating part and your lower part. Now what I like to do as well is make these non-collision. So basically other parts from this vehicle, from the submarine itself, can actually go through it. So the top part of the piston won't get stuck inside of the submarine. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make the part of the dive part. I'm gonna basically make it so that it dives realistically and actually can go fairly deep. So I'm gonna put it on no cycle, and I'm gonna give it the highest range there is. Then I'm gonna give it an action group if you want to, and I like to keep it on VTOL, but of course you can decide for yourself what you want to do with this. Now, if we attach this to the side of a submarine, and we spawn in, and we're gonna have to change our location, because it might float actually. Nope, it doesn't. Okay, now we're gonna change our location to a land position. If I now hit 1, which enables the piston, and I push this out, you'll see it actually extends. There you go. Of course it goes slowly because it's on 10% speed, but it will only go this far. In order to increase that distance, we're going to go into our XML mod again, go over to piston, import controller actually, and then go to max. Here we can change how far our piston can extend. I'm going to change this to, let's say, 6 for now. I think that's a good value to. Now if we increase this, it's going to take a bit of a while because the submarine is going to be diving at 10% speed of this moving. So this is how far a submarine is going to be able to go down, approximately. That's about right. Okay, so now in order to actually place this at a normal, like good level, so basically once you're surfaced, you want your submarine to be a bit visible. At least that's what I like to do, just because real life submarines have that as well. So what you want to do is you want to make this part as high as where you want the water line to be. So I am going to put that out there, and I'm going to test real quick if I can still extend my floating device, and yes I can. So this is a good placement for my thingy, I suppose. Alright, now we're gonna mirror this to the other side. Make sure that if you, for example, have offset parts, you don't use this function, but you just use the mirror part. And I'm gonna drag this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place 3 of these on the side and 3 on each side, basically. 1 in front of the center of mass, 1 behind the center of mass, and 1 around the center of mass. Hang on, let me first make sure. Oh, that's about right. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, let me test it again. Okay, that's the wrong group. Yep, both work. Alright. Now we can duplicate that part. Ooh. And duplicate that part. Now, if everything is done right, now they should both extend. There you go. Now I'm going to place 1 more of these behind the center of mass, like I said. Ooh, I just moved forward because these things are now here. They'll probably get cancelled out once I place this. Just to quickly check if these are all on the same level, I'm going to go over into the modding menu, or the part move menu, which is in mod, which you can download on the Simpleplanes website, because I believe these aren't aligned right now. So I'm going to look at the Y value, which is the height value, the Y axis. And as you can see, they're currently all different values. We're gonna straighten that out in a bit. And think about that for a second. Okay, so as you can see, they all work. Right? Now I am gonna go into the multi-select tool, select this part and copy the Y value, then finish, and multi-edit each part at a time, and that didn't do it. Hang on, let me see how this works again. multi-edit, multi-edit, boom, there you go. Ooh. Okay, so you need to select the same part as your first part, because that's basically the part it reads the position from, the Y position from. All right. Now we can move these all to the other side as well. And now if we hit 1, it should all extend. There you go. This looks about right. Yes. These don't need to be completely like symmetrical in terms of the weight distribution. It just needs to be able to float. So that's what I'm going to test right now. Is I'm going to change my location to any location that's in the water. Hang on, I have a submarine test site that I just placed down. I'm going to change this to time of day real quick. Okay. So as you can see, our submarine does float, but it's a bit bouncy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to either increase the weight of the submarine itself so that there's a heavier weight pulling it down, or what you can do is decrease the weight or the bounciness, or the, yeah, is it bounciness or is it the hang on, I'm going to check for you what it's called. You can either increase the weight of the submarine by either adding fuel or just mass, or you can decrease the buoyancy. There you go. Which I am going to do. You could also decrease the mass of the flotation devices in the XML mod again, just changing the mass scale to a bit lower. Right, I'm going to respawn that in. Right, it's a bit better now. It's a bit unstable because these things are fairly close to the center of mass, but I'm going to fix that because I'm going to move them out a bit after this. But I first want to test whether or not it actually works. So if we now extend this, our submarine should submerge, which it does, as you can see. There you go. Now, if you would just like your submarine to submerge even further, all you'd have to do is go over here and increase the input controller to an even higher value. That way you can just make it submerge even further. Alright, so now we're going to move these parts further away from the center on the x-axis. And let's say we're going to change this to minus 2. Minus 2 is a good value, and we'll change this side to 2. There you go. Oh, well, hang on. This way it's a bit more stable when it comes to side-to-side motion. As you can see, it now no longer rocks from side to side as much. But it should still work when it comes to the submersion. Now, like I said before, engines don't work underwater, which is a problem when you want to make your submarine go underwater. Now, how I went around this with my submarine, and it's actually a fairly easy trick, is going into the propulsion menu, and instead of using a normal engine, use the VTOL Blasto engine, and place this engine above the surface, and then use the VTOL nozzles for below surface propulsion, basically. So you can put these here, while the engine itself is above the water level, and then it will still be able to give thrust out of these nozzles. So that's what I'm going to do. But there's one problem with these engines, and that's they're quite fuel consuming. And there's another way to fix that again, which I'll show you. Now, don't worry, these parts are going to disappear, and they're going to be invisible, so it doesn't matter that they're very visible right now. I am going to change their color again to be very bright, just so we can easily see them. I'm going to go over here and change the mass scale to 0, and change this to true. Now I'm just going to copy that to the other side because that's easier. And then I like to, because when you rescale these, the air inlets also get rescaled, and then they won't pull enough air. So an easy way to fix that is to get a custom air intake, which once you rescale it, still pulls the same amount of air in. So there won't be a problem in terms of breathable air for the engines. Alright, there you go. Problem solved. So, now that you have these engines, you're gonna notice, like I said, two things. One, they're very fuel consuming, and two, they're gonna be fairly quick and might give your submarine a unrealistic speed which you might not want. Ooh. Does it actually connect here? Oh, yep, there you go. So, if we now activate one, these thrusters will activate, but as you can see, it uses about 4 liters of fuel a second, which is a lot more than a piston engine, which would use about, let's say, 0.4. And it's going very fast for a submarine. Now, the way I fixed this on my submarine is actually fairly simple. All I did was I went in here, the XML mod, to the input, and I changed the maximum input to 0.1. Basically what this does is this allows you to, when you put your engine on full throttle, it basically runs at 10% speed. I personally like this method because not only is it now slower, which I'm going to show you how to make it faster than it is now again. So it's now a bit closer to normal submarine speed. It also uses only 10% of the fuel that before. And what's most important, at least for a submarine, is listen how quiet it is. The idling engine, which is inactive, actually makes more noise than these two VTOL engines on full speed right now. Now there's one thing you're going to notice, at least this is something I noticed with my submarine, is that once I make it submerge, it's going to go slower than once it's above the water level. This is something to keep in mind if you're trying to make your submarine go a realistic speed. Right? So what I am going to do is I'm going to go to the engine. I'm going to put the power multiplier on 1.5 for now. Actually, let's put it on 2. Why not? Engine, power multiplier. Basically what this does is this now allows you to throttle the engine up to 10%, but instead of acting like it's 2 engines, it will now act like 4 engines. So it should be a lot more powerful and therefore a lot faster now as well. There you go. It now is quicker. Not by a lot, but just keep increasing the maximum input or the engine power value until you find the speed that you want, or decrease it based upon your preference, I suppose. Again, remember that once you submerge the engine or submerge the submarine, it will go slower than when it is above sea level. There you go. I'm gonna let it fully submerge for a bit and see how fast it goes. Oh wait, I just realized that I need to change this real quick. I like to put this, like I said, on 7 and then put it on pitch, because this is basically the action group I use and the control I use for parts that I don't use. Right, let's retry that. It still should go slower than usual, basically, than when it's above the surface level. And here's the rotating propeller that I mentioned. That makes it, in my opinion, that's a nice aesthetic to have, just like real life submarines. Instead of a fast rotating prop, basically. There you go, you can reach about 45, which is a realistic speed. I think that's the same as the... Is it the Nimitz class, maybe? I don't know submarine names in real life too well. Okay, so now that we have done the engine part, we're going to change a couple of things about the engines before I'm going to make them disappear, basically, and you can no longer see them. First things you should ask yourself is, would you like the exhaust to be visible? If not, go to the engine, thrust port, and just rescale this to 0. This will basically make the exhaust disappear, which I will quickly demonstrate. I'm also going to put these on action group 1, so that once I activate action group 1, I can control the movement and speed of the craft, but once I deactivate it and I want to use these controls for maybe action group 2, which might be for aiming or weapon systems, I can do that. Alright, there you go. So as you can see, there was no longer a flame coming out of the thrust ports. Now, as you might be able to see, I cannot steer this, even if I push any buttons or yaw. Does it move? There's 2 ways you can fix this. You can either use a rotator or hinge system to angle the thrust ports to a certain direction, and then when you use throttle, it will move it, which is the way I did it on my custom submarine. Or you can use what I'm going to do for this, because it's a bit easier and quicker, but less realistic, is use a gyroscope. I'm quickly going to configure this by going into this menu. It's about right. I'm going to keep these all on 0, apart from this one. None. Pitch, we'll put that on 7. Roll, we'll put it on 7 and pitch. And here is yaw input, and we'll put that on roll, just to use A and D to maneuver it. We'll put the input on, or the action group on 1. you go. Now we're going to quickly test this. And I can rotate the submarine, but that's a bit slow, so I'm going to change that real quick. There you go. A little bit on the slow side. It is easier than the standard. Like I said, it is easier than angling your thrust ports, but it is also a bit slower. You can also use ailerons, by the way, underwater. They seem to work as well, but then you will need to go at a higher speed. Which might be annoying when you're trying to aim your weapons, which is also an advantage of the gyroscope, so that you can aim your weapon systems while you're standing still. I'm gonna create another one just to see if this has an impact. Yes, it does. Okay, that's gonna be good enough for now. I'm gonna make these disappear just by basically giving them the same height as the fuselage part. Or the whole part, rather. Go. Right, shouldn't do anything without the action group activated. Yes, now if I activate one, go, I can steer my submarine. And also make it go forward. And I can make it dive. Still be able to maneuver your submarine while you're underwater using gyroscopes. There you go. You can see I can now move it. Okay. Now here comes the big part. You're gonna want to make these things disappear, these floaties disappear, right? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to rescale all these parts to have a width and a height of 0. However, if you change the height of the piston, it's going to be like changing the length of a normal part, which is going to make it disconnect from these two fuselage parts, which is going to make it sink. So it's important that you pay attention to the way I'm going to do this. First, I'm going to select every other part that needs to disappear apart from the pistons. Okay. Bit of an annoying process because you need to hit all of these small parts. Alright. Multi-edit, scale tool, and we're going to change this value to 0.00001. Basically the lowest amount you can get. You'll notice that you can't go smaller than, I think this is 6 digits? Yeah, 6 digits after 0. We're going to copy that. Basically that makes it invisible. However, basically that's the smallest you can go, basically, which makes it invisible. You can no longer see it. I know people that have put it on 0 before, which for some people that works, I've noticed. At least for some builds that works. My computer, however, just makes my game crash once I do that. So now, if I click Scale and Finish Edit, you'll now see all these parts are gone. And if you look very closely, you might be able to see a quick fracture of the pixels there, but I don't think you can. No, it's very, very hard to see. Alright? But, as you can see, it still floats. So if I now hit 1, I can extend the pistons, and you can see I'm extending, but there's no other visible parts here. And if I hit 1 and activate my thrust, you'll see that I will start going forward because these engines, which are invisible and hard to hear, you can hear them actually. Barely though, because they're hard, like I said, they're really quiet. But as you can see, we are increasing in speed, so they are still working. They'll steer, very slowly though, which I suppose it's realistic, but there you go. And now for final parts, we're going to make these pistons disappear to make it look like the submarine is diving by itself. Right, multi-edit. Now here's where you pay attention to what I'm doing, right? Instead of changing the height to 0.001, you want to change the length. Because basically how it works for pistons is it takes the height, thinks the height is this way, the y-axis is the height for pistons instead of length, like a normal fuselage block. So now we hit scale, Now you can see there's still really, really, really tiny shadows, but you can no longer see the ports. Right? Now we load it in. And if everything's done correctly, it should now float. Which it does. Ooh. So as you can see now, it looks like the submarine is floating all by itself. It looks like there's no other parts around the submarine. I can go forwards. And I can dive. Now, like I said, I cannot make these lines disappear, these water particles or water effects. I mean, if you find a way to do that, then please tell me in the comments section. But I've so far not found a way to do it. If you want to change how deep your submarine can go after you've done all the steps, and I am gonna be sorry to tell you that you can't, or you can, but you'll need to find the pistons, which is basically undoable. So you'll have to do the floats again if you want to increase or decrease your depth, basically. So make sure you do that before you make your things invisible. Basically, I recommend making your sinking or diving devices invisible as the last part of your build. Alright, now all that's left to do, I guess, is put some torpedoes on this, and you would have a fully functioning submarine. So, there you go. That's how you make a submarine in Simpleplanes. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. I'll try to reply. Yeah, that's it. Oh, one final quick tip. If you're building a submarine, it's actually really cool, and you put the cockpit inside of the submarine, which submerges. The destroyers cannot lock onto a cockpit that is below the water level. So that's an easy way of basically going in and torpedoing the boats, and then you can dive basically, and you'll be unable to be hit by the destroyers. Right? Like I said, goodbye. And maybe I'll make another video in the future explaining how to make custom rockets, but that's it. See ya!